So turning even more specifically to Highlands, you obviously know the Highlands well. Your dad was born in Tiree. You're a massive friend of Charles Kennedy, so you understand this area a bit. But what's your perception of the Highlands today as a place to live and work? And what do you think the general perception inside Westminster is of the Highlands?
That's a very good question. I mean, my personal perception, and one of the reasons why I was more than happy to come here, is because I just think it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I think sometimes people underestimate just how high it is up the kind of global ranking of most beautiful people on earth. And so that's, and then I think the other thing I'd say is that I have a sense that I think I do, particularly since my dad died probably, have a sense of belonging to a part of the culture that I like and appreciate. I think generally there's a very good question that. I remember, funny enough, I talked on the podcast this week, we had a question about whether the southwest of England was a neglected area. And I recalled a time when we were talking about structural funds, when we were a member of the European Union and the Germans were in the chair, and they were agreeing the structural funds, which was, how the funding for regional development gets divvied up between all the regions of Europe. And Tony Blair having these really quite difficult arguments with Schröder, who was then the German Chancellor. And Tony was absolutely batting for Devon and Cornwall and the Highlands and Islands because of specific needs and some of the challenges that are faced by having large areas of fairly unpopulated areas which nonetheless have needs of service and so forth. And I think the reason I was recalling that was because I think actually within the political firmament, I'm not sure that the Highlands and Islands are necessarily part of that UK national debate in a way that they should be. Now, is that because of devolution? I don't know. Sometimes it's about representation. It's about the people who represent an area. But I think I think there's probably a kind of a romantic view, but maybe that misunderstands or underestimates some of the specific challenges that are faced.
So in this week alone, we've had a £300 million investment from Sumitomo in a cable factory. We've had a $250 million American investment in a port. And if it all goes well, we should be providing the bulk of the UK's renewable energy in 20 years' time. Do you think there's an understanding of that?
No. And I think there should be, particularly on the last point. I think, look, I could be wrong here, and this may be unfair to the sort of political conventional wisdoms as they're formed in Westminster. But I think if you were to talk about the north of Scotland in relation to energy, I suspect they're still focused on oil and gas as that part of the debate. So that issue about renewables as to whether it is fully understood. I should put on record, I hate using internal flights, but the only way I could get here on time was to fly. But I was really struck last night looking out of the plane, just how many in these amazing, beautiful areas, remote areas, just how many wind farms there were, which I think is a great thing. But are people aware that this region is such a big part of that? I don't think they are.
No, I don't think they are either. And it should now move to offshore floating wind. It should move to hydrogen.
Yeah.
And we're the only part of the UK with the right geography, the deep water, the wind, and so on.
Yeah.
So we've a job to do.
Yeah, and I think these. No, I think because areas, every town, every city, every region has to have a sense of itself, and then you have to decide how much does it matter that sense of yourself is communicated more widely. And I think it's important. I think if you have a success story to tell about a particular sector in a particular region, then make sure that people know it, because that's how you build on that success.
Yeah, absolutely.